Thank you. Thank you. Hello. Hang on. Let me put my phone down because I'll just start looking at my phone on stream. I have no manners. I have no social skills at all. Hello. I have my coffee. I have everything. Let me just check everything's working. Let me turn off the preview. I'll let you know that if you're watching on LinkedIn or X, that it's 50-50 on whether the comments come through. So go to the YouTube link if you're trying to talk to me. But this one's more of a very much not terribly interactive because, you know, there's a lot of stuff to get through and I try not to make things too long. But I do kind of, I feel this, like, again, it's the same frustration, is that, you know, people who are paid millions and millions of dollars and are amplified on all of these platforms, who are cherry picking information to the benefit of the people who own those platforms. And, you know, you really got to, like, think about reading beyond the headline. Like, seriously, like, how hard is it to just make a decision to go, you know what, I'm not going to react to a thing until I know, like, what it actually is, okay? It's just a tweet or just a headline. And, you know, the social media ban is a classic example of that because you know what happens is that you end up with, you know, people like Glenn Greenwald, and I'm writing a thing actually quite heavily debunking Glenn Greenwald. The problem is it's now 7,000 words, so I need to cut it down. And a lot of his sort of paranoid cherry picking over how, you know, like it just building narrative around things that are fairly benign. They're nowhere near as interesting as the story that people are trying to tell, but they are interested in, they do have a vested interest in having you oppose sensible regulation. Okay, like I've been talking about this for, I mean, how long have I been doing YouTube now? 5 years? Oh my God. Yes, an exponential growth she has seen. But anyway, but you know, the frustration that I've got is that the people who actually read the 250-page report understand the context of what's going on, know the difference between, you know, states and federal government and different countries having different governments and different processes. That's the focus of, you know, my debunking Mr. Greenwald. Like, and also, you know, as a lawyer, he should know better. But, you know, like, but they just go and they say stuff in a, you know, 15-second soundbite, all polished and ready for TV and all of that sort of stuff. And it's up to people like me who are readers and writers more than they're presenters. And then the burden's on me to learn how to talk to a fucking camera and learn how to present my message in 5-second sound bites to just, you know, and not even get anywhere because I'm dealing with facts and truth, and the facts and the truth, like, are more complicated than, you know, they or whoever the fuck the they thems, it's the theys and the they thems and the you know, the West, and, you know, it's like scapegoating of these fucking enemies that just completely oversimplifies, relies on your ignorance about these things because they're complicated, okay, and complex. Those are different things. And in the case of tech law or tech regulation, those are both complicated and complex, okay? But then the burden is shifted. You know, like that thing, I think there's, what's that saying? Could have looked this up, didn't. That saying about it takes 5 seconds to tell a lie and fucking, you know, 5 years to, like, debunk it. You know, and that's what these guys, like, count on. And, like, just be a little more suspicious about, like, I mean, again, I can't, people who are already, they've caught brainworms, they're on that train where they think, you know, I mean, the thing that, okay, I'm addressing this in the essay, but it does relate to today's thing, which is, you know, like, if they're linking social media bans, they're trying to link large issues together and tell a story, that should be a red flag. Like, obviously there's an element of storytelling when you're doing this kind of stuff. When you're trying to engage people and get people to watch you, you do have to have some degree of, like, storytelling and you got to make it interesting. Like, I struggle to be interesting. Okay. It's something that it doesn't come naturally to me, but that's because I go into the details. Like I said, like, I read a 250-page report from the South Australian government. I've read whatever's on the table, with the Privacy Act reviews. I've read all of these proposals. I've read all of the public submissions. I've read across the UK. I've read the EU stuff. I've read all of that stuff. And do you know what? Then I find myself talking to 5 fucking people because 5 people are interested in the details, and everyone else is going off on bad information. And even journalists who, knee-jerk react to the headline. They write a headline. Oh, well, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, said we're going to implement a social media ban, bad word, for under-16s, okay? And his tweets were just politicians doing politician shit. When you see a politician's tweet, you should assume that they're just sort of doing puffery and talking bullshit, and that you want to see something actually, under the hood. You want to see the details, okay? And this is a classic example of that, where people just reacted to a tweet. They didn't have any context. They didn't understand. Again, this is one of the problems I think that Labor as a government they've always had, which is that they've got to do this, play the Murdoch, play the soundbite game for things that they shouldn't be sound bites. Like, social media regulation is incredibly complicated, and it also requires a lot of prior knowledge. Like, most people don't know why you would want to put federal legislation in, right? They don't understand that there is a perfectly good reason why that would happen. A lot of people don't understand how our legal system operates, and how it is actually pretty impossible to do anything that involves overreach, because there's all of these checks and balances and processes. We are one of the most robust. I mean, yes, it might be overwhelming. It might take time. It might take a few, it might inconvenience you a minute. Okay, sorry. Okay, it might put some friction in your way, but you do have rights. You do have rights of appeal. You do have a process. There's always a process that you can get a review. And, we're better at that than most countries. Okay, so for the people to turn around and start getting in these histrionic fits about social media bans and how it's authoritarian and how they're bringing about digital ID, and they're criminalizing the internet, and they're censoring the internet. What will the small websites do? I'm going to have to shut my website down. Again, it is completely concealing and obfuscating the fact that tech billionaires are who own these platforms, have a vested interest in promoting the people who are saying those things and spreading those lies, and that is not what's happening. What is happening is some perfectly fucking sensible regulation. And what they're doing is introducing legislation that is coordinated, because it is necessary, because the government is obeying the law and the Constitution, and they have to implement certain laws within the process to be able to enforce these things against big tech companies. Okay. Now, as much as I'd love to do a legal studies 101, I get to the point where I'm talking to fucking 5-year-olds. If you don't know, look it up. It's not my job to explain, how 1,000 years of fucking common law works. Okay. It's not my job to explain to you the basics between federal, state, and local government. It's not my job to understand, to tell you how, you can go get an explainer video. That's not my fucking job. That's the job that people who make money can do. I'm just going to tell you it's not that, and I'll tell you why. Okay, I'll just explain the basics of what this is, because it winds me up something chronic that the people who are willing to spread bullshit on behalf of these billionaires who hop from country to country, to jurisdiction to jurisdiction to jurisdiction, they take the piss, they exploit our data, they steal from us, and while the evidence is mixed on social media harms around children, yes, this stuff acknowledges that, and it's a good plan, and so they will promote the stuff where it's like they are coming after you, and you're no, they're not coming after you. They're going after the tech companies. They're going after making tech companies liable for the harms caused by their platform. They're not making up those harms. They're making them liable for the harms that they do cause. And they're putting some more, putting like a greater onus on them and establishing a duty of care, which is something I've talked about at length, which is that there is no recourse right now for users to have any action against a tech company. Like at the moment, we're still trying to find the avenues. One might be consumer law, one might be contract, one might be tort, one might be, whatever. What we are seeing. So in the US, there's currently a TikTok lawsuit going on, right, which is like a kid who asphyxiated to death, right, which is the blackout challenge, right, and the parents have sued. And they shouldn't have to go through these processes of tech companies, first of all, forcing arbitration as a default, which is like bullshit. They shouldn't do that. But also, their first move when they get sued for something like that, for which they should be liable, or at least should be heard, the parents should get their day in court with this stuff. Okay. Again, whether or not, it will come down to quibbles of law, right? That's fine. But they shouldn't have to go through all of these hurdles just to get their day in court because TikTok are filing for a dismissal based on Section 230 because they're not liable for anything ever, any of the time, for any of their content. Like that's not a threshold that is satisfactory in this situation, right? It's just not there. So what Australia has done is started to look at these in a pragmatic way. They've looked at how it's been implemented in Europe and how it's in France and, all of the other places, right? They're looking at other countries that might have some ideas. They're looking at the research. They're engaging stakeholders. It's a democratically elected government. It started. Okay, so what more? It's not authoritarian, for fuck's sake. Governing is not authoritarian unless you are Peter Thiel and funded by Peter Thiel and on Peter Thiel's media and on Elon Musk's X. Unless you are directly unless you're not affected unless you're Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Mark Zuckerberg, okay? You're not affected unless you are a big tech company, okay? Now, she's gotten going. I thought this might be an educational video and it ends up with me yelling. So there you go. But it pisses me off because, I sit there and it's like, I sit and I read hundreds and hundreds of pages of reports. I do the right thing and I sit there and I go, oh, fuck, well, I've got to package this up in a 30-second fucking soundbite lest people with brain worms think that I'm a censor. It's like, no, I know what the fucking story is. So anyway. Where this started. Okay. Let me have a drink. I'm very flustered. Dickhead. Okay. Let's have a drink. So basically what happened was last week, one of the weeks, all days blend into each other now. It's just more and more shit every day. Okay. So basically what happened was the Prime Minister of Australia put out a tweet saying we're introducing a ban for social media for under-16s. Obviously, there was a press release around it, not a lot of details. Now, their mistake was obviously that those in the know would know that the reason that they are saying that is because South Australia have actually tried to have done the heavy lifting with this thing. They've done a massive inquiry into the platforms, into the harms of the platforms, looking at solutions and, various policy solutions. It's actually a really great report. It's quite well balanced. And, it's quite detailed and it sort of acknowledges the sensitivity and delicate balance between, speech rights and all that sort of stuff. So for those who don't look things up, Australia has 6 states. We are a federation, much like the United States. Okay. We have a default of the states having power. Okay. So the way that the power is balanced in our country. Now I'm being very, 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 simple. I'm not going to go into external affairs, parent, whatever. I'm just going to be simple, which is that power defaults to the states. Okay. So the states run the show unless the federal government sort of has sort of limited express powers. Okay. So that's how it works here. How we also are different from the United States is that we have a strong judicial review system. We have administrative We have a much stronger informal system, similar to France. And again, I don't know if they're like, again, America's so huge and it's not a behemoth and it's like complicated in its own way. But I'm saying that you need to understand that we have a somewhat unique system where you have an ombudsman. So for every government department that you have, which has a statute that governs its mandate, okay, you also have a administrative review and you have a tribunal. You have a whole process to be able to appeal every single part of that, okay? And the foundations of that is on rights, natural rights, fair process. You know, that it's very, like, you'll see this. Like, again, I'll mention this in the essay that I'm working on because that focuses more on how Australia's legal system works, which is why a lawyer should know better because you can't be authoritarian unless you throw out all of the government, and it's just not possible. We are, you know, almost we're in ways that it can be inefficient and time-consuming and annoying and bureaucratic. You know, it's protective against overreach, okay, or authoritarianism, okay? Now, is there a banality of evil aspect to some of this stuff? Yes, because, you know, that's going to happen with bureaucracy, okay? And, well, corporations are like the same, right? But, you know, for the most part, we have checks and balances in place. We have a review. So if you get, you don't have that with tech right now. If you get banned from Twitter, you have no review process. You don't have anything. Okay. And I've talked about this. If you get banned from Twitter or you get like hurt, injured by, you know, or harassed or by someone on Facebook, okay, and they make your life a living hell, you, up until recently, had no recourse because those tech companies don't have any review process. Okay, now remember Zuckerberg tried to introduce his like Facebook Supreme Court and his review process, but then they automated the whole thing and made it pointless. There's no point. Okay, the oversight board is a dog's breakfast. But in principle, because of the size of these platforms, which are international in nature, okay, and they are, you know, across countries, which means they're across jurisdictions. They are, you need a coordinated approach because otherwise they will just do the old Musk tricks, which is hop from jurisdiction to jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Okay. So you wouldn't, so first of all, you wouldn't have recourse against the company up until recently if anything happened or they did any harm or they, you know, suppressed your rights in any way. Okay. But also, if you did try to take them to court, they would hide behind either jurisdiction, so that, you know, that's one loophole that needs closing. You actually have to have a reason to sue. You can't just sue for being banned on Twitter because there's no law there. But if there is a law there, then you can sue. So when I talk about there being a law in which you can sue for harm, that law needs to be on the books and exist. And what it's done is these types of proposed laws, what they do is they kind of fast forward what might take 5 to 10 years in the courts to get to the High Court or get to wherever. What it does is it you know, that's how these things work together. Okay. Now again, I'm not going to teach you how laws are made. Like it's just too much material. Okay. But I'm trying to be as concise as I can. And it is, you know, obviously because I have ADHD, sometimes sorting what is the important, simple information and what isn't, I might go into a rabbit hole, but, you know, I'll try and edit something. But do look at my written piece because my written piece that is coming that debunks Glenn Greenwald's claims about the disinformation laws, that's got more of this in it, which is that we're not authoritarian. It's not, it's bullshit. It's not true. They are not coordinating against you. They are coordinating against the person who pays Glenn Greenwald quite a bit of money to fight these cross-country, fairly reasonable regulations. Okay, they're pretty reasonable. They're not censorship. Okay, and I've read them, and you know, like I'm pretty anti-censorship, and I'm very pro-user rights, and I don't see anything. And if I did see any, you know, obviously there's questions because you know we don't jump to conclusions. It's almost like there's a process for discovery where, you know, it's inbuilt. Okay, so In Australia, every time laws are reviewed, every time they are appealed, anything like that, okay? Sorry, not appealed. Any time that you are introducing a bill or reviewing a bill or looking at the law, or you can actually just set up a subcommittee, okay? That has a public consultation period where, experts are consulted. They consult the research, stakeholders look at it, the tech companies submit, and then they pull that all together and they come back with a report, and then they have some recommendations attached to that report. Okay, so and that happens at every stage. So at the beginning, when they first start, and then they put a draft submission, and then they take, how much more democracy do you need? Is what I'm saying. Because you're not using the democratic levers you've got right now. So what are you saying? What are you saying? I don't want to be told what to do. That's what it comes down to. This is libertarians. I don't like it. I don't know anything about it. I don't like it. It just sounds bad, and I don't want to be told what to do. And it's like, fuck you. That's not how you live in a society. Go fuck yourself. So anyway, but basically, I just watched this thing just travel, and everyone just flipping out, going, digital ID, digital ID. Well, that's one technology, maybe. There's other technologies and other processes, and they're not saying that. Fucking, oh my God, the brainworms. So anyway, but remember, I'm acknowledging right now, okay, so this is, first of all, for under-16s, okay? So historically, we've got the Online Safety Act that has allowed for things like cyber stalking, cyber harassment, all of that sort of stuff. That was initially for children, but now obviously that covers everybody, okay? This one is, having age verification in some form, okay? There's lots of different ways to do it, okay? Implemented. Now, this is a staged approach, first of all. So there's multiple stages, okay? It depends on the situation, so that everything is built in. The way that it is being built, hang on, no, let me go back. There's no real legislation on the table just yet, okay? There's no details. We've got the recommendations from the report. So in South Australia, they did this 250-page report, which has taken all of the research, all of the feedback, all of the criticisms, all of the concerns, all of the critiques, the pros and the cons, and they've balanced it, and they've come back with this report, okay? The recommendations are that, hang on, I've got notes for this, okay? So the research says, right, so it acknowledges that the evidence is mixed. Like I've talked about this before. It acknowledges that the evidence is mixed, first of all. Now, everyone sits there going, well, there is no harm in social media. There's no harm. No, it's like, yeah, you didn't read the research. I do. The evidence is mixed. Yes, okay. Now, but there is some link between mental health issues. Now, again, it depends. What platform, what design pattern, what use case, is the kid is the kid already vulnerable? What's the socioeconomic status? There's lots of confounding variables for this stuff. But there is some link, okay, between some children, okay, some under-16s, especially teenage girls, and mental health issues and smartphone addiction. Now, smartphone addiction, is, well, not social media. It's all in a cluster of in the proposed DSM, right? It's I don't know. That's still being debated. That's still contentious. Okay, but again, there's different. These are all debates that are ongoing. Okay. Now the other thing is that they acknowledge that this thing needs to be flexible. Okay, it acknowledges that this is that it's changing. It is creating a legislative framework to be able to allow people to take action against tech companies for any injury or harm, which is fantastic, okay, makes them liable for cyberbullying, harassment, and various other things, especially when it involves them not acting, okay? So the Online Safety Act right now is actually very similar in the way that it, the Online Safety Act does that, which is that it is, if they can show that they have reasonably acted in good faith, to try and comply, and that they work with the government, they work with, you know, this wouldn't be e-safety, it might be, you know, if you will do the right thing, can show you do the right thing, work with them to fix the problem, are proactive and all those sorts of things, then you get protection from that. You get a defence, okay? So that is actually built into the Online Safety Act. I've talked about that before. So I imagine that this would extend that, okay? Now, again, I'm guessing. So it would probably be e-safety again, I'm guessing. Don't quote me on that. But there is some indication that there are harms, okay? Now, and, you know, so if in the instance of, you know, cyberbullying, if, you know, that person is reporting and they don't act on that report, then, and they don't take it down, you know, like there's all these, anyway, I've waffled. Hang on, give me a sec. It's a lot of stuff. And I'm not very good at it. But, so the evidence, again, it acknowledges that the evidence is mixed. I want to emphasize that. Okay. It also acknowledges that there needs to be exemptions. So when you're talking about mixed evidence for social media harms, okay, in adolescents, right, there's also a lot of benefits. So the consensus mostly with like psych research and that sort of stuff, right, is that, excuse me, that there are downsides, upsides. On balance, there's upsides, but there are risks, and there are, you know, like the social media platforms aren't doing enough to mitigate those harms, okay? Now, currently, they've got to make a product. Like you've probably seen this week that Meta have implemented the Instagram for Teens app, right? Which they've put in all of these parental controls, you know, all of that sort of stuff. Like I'm not going to go into those details, but that is just, you know, one example. But Facebook are only doing that because of the pressure that they've been under. Okay, because of the PR scrutiny. It shouldn't be up to Facebook to decide to make this product. What these laws do is mandate that they have to make, they have to take, like, again, they have to take reasonable measures to comply and make sure that they are doing everything that is within their control to, you know, to prevent harm for users. Okay, now, you know, internet bros are going to go, what is harm? What is harm? What is what? What is harm? It's like, well, there's bodies of, go do a literature review. It's there. What is far right? It's defined. It's consensus. What is this? What is this? It's like, the research is there. I'm not here to do a literature review for you. Fucking ask ChatGPT. It won't give you accurate studies, but it's a start, okay? Ask what I meant by a certain sentence, and ChatGPT is pretty good at explaining it, okay? Surprisingly good, actually. But it's what I'm saying is backed by the evidence, so just assume that, okay? But the positive impacts of social media are also acknowledged in this report, which is that it can provide community, and it, you know, did that for me when I was younger, and still does. Not so much anymore because it is a fucking hellscape, because I got on the internet to escape fucking idiot, retard, dumb fucks, and now to escape that stuff, I have to log off. Anyway, it's like, what the fuck? You can't get anywhere. You can't find anybody. You can't find your people anymore. It's all just like drip-fed bullshit. I don't want kids like on that anyway. I don't want to, because I've seen what people do when they're arguing with a Twitter account that looks like an idiot teenager who's just saying stuff, and they'll brigade, grown-ass adults are brigading against a teenager. And it's like, no, they shouldn't be on there. It's like, they shouldn't be hanging out at a bar either. Okay, it's an adult space as far as I'm concerned. Okay, and I agree with, you know, some of that sentiment. Okay, but you don't also want to isolate them, you know, away from their community, right? That's a balance to be had. Okay, and it acknowledges that. Okay, which is that the benefits are sometimes outweigh the risks, especially in vulnerable communities, especially LGBTQ communities, right? That sort of stuff. Autism in particular, like autistic communities and those sorts of things, are of tremendous benefit, finding communities. Like one example that I can think of with my son is that he's like a maths nerd genius, complete fucking, top 1% brain in maths, right? I don't know where that came from, but I'm smart, but I'm not a math brain really. He has, he's in Discord channels and stuff with other math geniuses where they talk about math problems and all that sort of stuff. Whereas if he didn't have those communities, he'd feel probably a lot more isolated and unusual and all that sort of stuff. But he's like your typical Rain Man math nerd, right? He's found his people. He's found a community where they can sort of talk about the stuff that they love talking about and it not be weird, okay? Or not be weird, right? Weird's a good thing in my family. We're all kind of weird. You might have met me. I'm a little odd. But it does, can provide some social support where, especially in families where, he might be bullied by siblings or whatever. Thankfully, he's in a family that's not like that. But, I'm saying it provides that community for him. And also, let's not forget educational resources, the way that it's, obviously you don't want to be cutting them off from educational resources, health resources, banking, the general internet, the transactional internet. But that's not a target anyway. But under this proposal, those can get an exemption. You can be exempt from that stuff. Okay, so let's use an example of, there's also another, so we're borrowing from everyone. So the thing about the law is that we kind of, at the moment, when it's emerging, we're borrowing from everyone, okay? So we're looking at Europe and looking at the DSA and, in our vast, great conspiracy of the they-thems who are coming to get you and your memes. So I know they're fucking not. They want you to stop spreading bullshit. And if you're not spreading bullshit for profit, there's no problem. Okay. Now, deliberately. Anyway, I'll talk about that separately. That's a whole other set. I'm focusing on the children right now. So, but we look to other countries, okay, and we go, oh, how have they done it? What can we learn from them? All of that sort of stuff. So we look to that and they go, okay, well, they've put exemptions in place. Okay. Hang on, my brain just went, fuck. Hang on. I need sustenance. But there are positive impacts. And you don't want to be cutting kids off the internet, right? And you most definitely don't want to be having unintended consequences where, like with alcohol, where, the kid that could never touch anything and could never had any fun and they hit 18 and they get alcohol poisoning because they don't know how to do things responsibly. Like we don't want those types of unintended consequences either, like with prohibition. Again, I think prohibition oversimplifies that stuff. But, you obviously don't want people to be having, black market alternatives to these things. That's always a risk, right? But that's not what this law does either. It's not a prohibition as such. It is regulation. It puts the onus on large platforms, okay? Oh, that's right. I started meandering and I was, okay, now I'm back. So under the Digital Services Act and the EU, they have defined. You might have seen VLOP, very large online platform. I've talked about them before. That's somewhat like the standard. So the very large online platforms are, they have to reach a certain threshold, like in terms of number of users. They have to, have a certain amount of revenue. A certain level of risk is attached to the platform. So if it is something like TikTok or Twitter, which is real time, off the cuff, communication, then obviously like that's a higher risk platform than something like eBay. Okay. I don't think eBay is not a VLOP. I know Temu and Amazon are, but these things are defined in they've managed to sort of work through a way of defining this stuff. And so this stuff only identifies sort of high risk platforms. Okay. So you're talking about your Facebooks, your Instagram, your TikToks, X, Obviously the less compliant they are, the higher, like the riskier they are. So X is going to be in the crosshairs, so to speak, more because he's just not complying, and it is the non-compliance that is actually getting him in the shit. He's just being a dickhead, and it's like a lot of the requests and the asks are just him playing games and not wanting to be regulated across the board. It's got nothing to do with free speech. And everything to do with the fact that they just don't want, they want to be able to control this stuff. And also in the case of X, I think a lot of it has to do with the inauthenticity of the accounts and having to have transparency around the way that their platforms operate and a process and user rights. X does not want users to have rights because they're arbitrary, like shadow banning and my right to turn around and go, I want to audit my account, or you are responsible because I, was harassed and you did nothing, and I reported like these violent threats against women, which happen a lot, and you did nothing, and it led to, a shooting, for example. They obviously have a vested interest in that not happening. But also, they've got brain rot. They've got libertarian brain rot, which is, you can't tell us what to do. I'm fucking 4. I'm 4. I am nearly 5. I can do what I want. It's like, no, fuck off. No, that's really what it comes down to. Is this? They hide behind your fear around government, around speech, and it is absolutely not that. They're attaching a story that is not happening, which is some weird conspiracy coordination between Western people to censor your fucking cat memes. No one gives a fuck about your cat memes, okay? The thing is that these decisions need to be subjected to, like, the sovereignty of the state. So these companies exist outside of state borders, okay? And when I say state, I mean nation state in this case. And they are arbitrarily able to, nudge and manipulate like narratives to their advantage, as you see. Who they boost and who they promote and who they suppress is too much power. They can, it's like they need to be reeled in, okay? And the paradox of all of this is that they own the platforms where people are saying that it's such a fucking self-fulfilling problem. It's such a bullshit thing, but it's like, okay, well, let's maybe get some cut through. But like the whole thing is like, well, the people who own the platform are putting the message on the platform that the platform's being censored. What are the odds of that? It's like, well, that just isn't inherently, it just shows the abuse of power because they're assuming that you haven't read the report. But I have. I read it. So I'd like to say I read it so you don't have to. I read it and I'd like you to before opening your big fat fucking gob about stuff. That would be nice for starts. Okay, so the research is mixed. Okay. So they acknowledge that, okay? And so there are exemptions, and it's a good faith thing. These regulations are all intended in good faith. So basically it's like, well, if you're running an educational platform or you meet certain criteria, I imagine that there'll be some accreditation business. So for me, the solution that I wanted to sort of implement, and again, got nowhere because they're not interested, because they don't give a fuck, and they've been given ample opportunities to actually give a fuck about users over the years, and they've chosen the opposite, okay, which is to just like get cases dismissed and like bully people in arbitration and all that sort of stuff, okay. They've had multiple opportunities to do so, okay. Now, so the previous behaviour, they've done nothing to make it right, okay. A lot of it is just PR and bullshit. So, but the idea that I had was that you would have like these institutions where, hang on, my brain forgot what it was doing again. Hang on. What was I saying? Can't remember. It'll come back to me. I know I had the idea. I can't remember what I was saying, what part of the idea, because I've had lots of ideas, but that's all right. I'll remember later. I'll come back to it. I'm a better writer than I am a talker. But you got to, these things are stripped of context. It's bad enough. I mean, the thing is that they should know better than to tweet this shit. okay, and without adding the context, which is what happened was that the South Australian government did this report. They went through this extensive process. They consulted with stakeholders. It's a good report. It's interesting. Now, how Australia works is that you can't, if it's only implemented in South Australia, they can only enforce it in South Australia, which means it's useless because South Australia has fucking got no power, okay? So they can, and also because consumer law, because it's, even though they're global companies, they usually have a headquarters here, but their headquarters would be under federal law because it's a company. They're not running a small business or anything like that. So we've got different levels of consumer law and layers. And so one of the things that people don't understand is that it's normal for us to have uniform laws. So if there's one law in one state that everyone thinks is good and, beneficial, what they do is they'll sort of implement that across the states or federally so that those are uniform because, we've got different states. People can travel and it just makes it easier so that every Supreme Court in every state, speaking simply, has the ability to, serve you and issue a judgment and, send the bailiffs if you don't comply or, seize assets or, that sort of stuff. So what that does is it just gives them the ability to do that. Okay. Now there's going to be people with brainworms who don't want people to have that power. Okay. Yes. All right. Sure. Okay. But what's your alternative solution then? Is it to just have Mad Max, every man for himself? No, lots of different laws. You're seeing that with the Roe versus Wade stuff and Dobbs at the moment, the implications of like states' rights, right? That sort of stuff, it ends in, it ends badly, okay? And it ends in, and we're a small country, okay? We've got a population that's roughly the size of like one American state. We just make sure that those things are sort of uniform across the country, enforceable across the country. And then obviously you have the international agreement side of that where if, we've seen that with the whole J.K. Rowling, Elon Musk thing with the Olympics, right, where there was a criminal complaint made, but we know that it can't go anywhere because they are citizens of another country. And unless it's like also law in the United States or also law, they can't even serve you. Okay. Well, actually, no, that's not true. You can serve them, but they can ignore it. They don't have to do anything, right? But you can't really enforce anything without those agreements. That's what those agreements are. It's just making sure that we're closing loopholes so that these guys don't skip town and don't actually do have some liability for things that are within their control. Now, those have exceptions. Okay, so first of all, it only applies to high-risk, large platforms. It doesn't. Anyone who says that it's applying to websites or, your ability to access the internet in general, or that it's an internet filter or anything like that, is full of shit. Okay, that's not happening. Okay. There's no digital ID as yet, and I'll address that in a minute because, again, the details matter. It is actually, it's not just I personally think that a encrypted device level encryption, device level authentic, age verification. I've got too many words going there. Blah, too many words. So device at the device level, you do all of that stuff. So like your any biometric data or fingerprints or anything like that you might use, that's only on the device. That is encrypted, and all the servers get, all the apps get is a yes or no verified, okay, age verified. That's how that should work. Now, that raises other problems, but I err on the pro-privacy. I don't think that Facebook, make no mistake, Facebook already know, Meta already know, any kid that's under 16 today, they know how old they are. Do you know why? Because us dipshits shared their every move, thinking that it would we were using period trackers and cycle trackers and ovulation trackers and all that stuff, and our photos and when our kids were born and our life events. We've been live tweeting our lives for that long. My youngest, his birth was on Facebook, not his actual birth, but when he was born premature. I've got a photo of him in the fucking ICU. They know how old he is what I'm saying. And it shouldn't be them who has the data. It's actually, if it was done correctly, they would have and they were obviously had to destroy the rest, okay? There's fewer and fewer justifications for them to hold that data, because one of the justifications that they have for having that data is so that they can know who you are and verify your identity and all that sort of stuff. If you have some sort of, again, ID, digital ID, that's oversimplifying it, right? You know, the Orwellian version of that is fucking Peter Thiel's Palantir shit. The reason they want to oppose this stuff and want you scared of the wrong targets is because he's making a killing on that, literally, on that data that he shouldn't have in the first place. They should only have access to, am I a real person? Yes or no? Am I verified? Yes or no? Am I over the age? Yes or no? And that's the only data that should be accessible. The rest should be in a fucking encrypted wallet that is on my phone or some sort of device. And, you know, obviously people will develop tech to make that easier. So this is where the market will, you know, as I've said before, you know, the law sets the standard and they go, you've got 2 years to implement tech that we believe in you. Off you fuck. Try your best. And also in the law, what we'll do is we'll make it so that if you can't get the technology together in that time, because we hear you, we've done a comprehensive report with all of the experts. We understand what's going on here. What we will do is we will put the word reasonable in it. And what we will say is that if you can reasonably show that you've made substantial efforts towards implementing technology that, you know, meets all of this criteria and satisfies this problem, good on you. You've done your best. Gold star, happy stamp. It's not a fucking problem. People vastly overestimate. Like, again, they use outliers to do it. Like, you know, robo-debt was not a surveillance job per se, but a fuck up of implementation. It was not the intent and the reason behind it does matter in this instance. Yes, the end result was horrific, which was, you know, like incorrect debts and people being harassed and all that sort of stuff. I'm not dismissing the end result, but it was a failure of processes and a bad IT implementation and a terrible implementation. Okay, it wasn't necessarily they weren't intending to undo surveillance. It's just it was data matching. And I know how it would have been sold because I worked on these projects. It would have been sold as a way of, like, you know, making it easier and to verify claims for fraud, right? And again, you know, whatever. Okay, we're not going to get into the fucking, you know, again, ordinary person test applies to me as well. And when I'm talking, if you're an ordinary, rational, educated, fucking reasonable person, then you know what I'm talking about here, which is that it was there to catch, like, welfare cheats. Now, again, I'm not going to, what does it mean to steal from the, fuck off with your quibbles. Okay, that was the intention. So everything herein requires a reasonable person test, except for me, because I'm completely unreasonable. But anyway, so the report was done with exceptions in mind, right? Because they talk to everybody about it. You read the report, they acknowledge the limitations. They acknowledge the technical limitations. They acknowledge the nuance in the research. They acknowledge that you don't want to be taking the internet away from the kids. They also acknowledge that you don't want to be taking social media away from a bunch of kids who have relied on it and somewhat addicted to it, that there's going to be consequences to that, right? There's going to be unintended consequences where, you know, they need a plan for a transition to promote, you know, like the healthy behaviours. And, you know, they're not just going, it's banned now, send the army. It's like, oh my God, how infantile are you? That, like, you think that it's like, 6-year-old on a phone, call the cops. I swear to God that that's how people think it's going down. It's like, no, it's probably like I said, staged. So high risk platform, TikTok, Twitter, X particularly would probably be the top risk at the moment. Instagram, those big big online social media platforms. Okay, I mean, I don't know how many kids are on LinkedIn, but You never know. You might see an upsurge in child LinkedIn accounts, especially if the Republicans get their way and child labour is legal because they care about the kids. Anyway, you never know. You might start to see 12-year-olds with, LinkedIn profiles. Fuck me. Now that's dystopian. That's a dystopian thought. But this is really nothing to worry about. So basically, like anything that's educational, healthcare, or you can show. So if you find yourself somehow, you're running a large. Let's say you're Mark Zuckerberg and you're watching this. Okay. Let's say you own YouTube and you are watching this right now. They're not going to it only applies to like the big platform. But let's say you are YouTube or you are Meta and you are not kids are on your platform, okay? Despite doing what you can, whatever. Despite what you've tried to do, putting the Instagram for teens or whatever you try to implement that helps with that problem, right? Or, you're doing the best you can. They'll call you up. Well, probably they won't call you up. They'll write you a letter of concern like the eSafety Office currently does. They'll write you a letter and they'll go, well, you probably should let us know. Here's a warning. We're curious. What are you doing about this? This is a concern. And then Facebook's lawyers will go, well, how can we get out of this? Okay, good faith argument. Facebook can then show that they are doing, first of all, reasonably trying and doing their best and like explain what they're doing and give that. Basically, it'll be probably a yearly transparency report like they always do because fucking toothless. And also like what they're doing. And, if the content and stuff is educational and a little bit more information on their algorithmic decisions around like what kind of content that they're pushing, what kind of accounts they're promoting, like that sort of stuff. Like the government just needs some input and parents in particular need input into what their children are seeing unsupervised. And so so what that does is just create an environment where they are compelled to do that, and that is coordinated across various countries. Like we're talking to different countries because we're learning as we go from like what's working and what's not working and what unintended consequences are and what the research is because, and some are further ahead, like the EU is further ahead than us in this. So of course we're going to learn from them. We're going to see like how we can implement better laws. But basically, so what's happened here is that South Australia's got this report. The federal government have gone, well, it probably needs to be a federal law. And if it's a federal law, then the states will put in like matching legislation across the country. And that's just an operational thing, okay? So what we're going to end up with, I don't know whether it's the eSafety Commissioner or privacy or what, or I mean, honestly, and that's another thing that I explained in this other thing that I'm writing is that we have very siloed departments. They don't talk. This is the baseline assumption that a lot of these sort of like bad faith reports about the censorship and like authoritarian governments that. I mean, Glenn Greenwald in particular should know better. I don't expect it of like someone like Russell Brand or like idiots like that. But I do expect this of someone who has studied law, which is that the governments and I explained this in my video about Ofcom and Russell Brand bullshitting about censorship as well, which is that they can only act within like their powers. Like they're limited, extremely limited powers, and only a statute can direct what that particular department can do. And that ombudsman, it's called an ombudsman, all right? They are the people that review the decisions of that department, and there's a whole process there, the whole civil process. This is how we've sort of over time started to mimic France a little bit. Like we're more sort of heading more in that civil law kind of thing. But anyway. whole other thing. But, you know, there's all these checks and balances throughout every layer of the process. You've got limited powers between different things. You've got, so with tech law, you've got you've got ACMA, which is the Australian Communications Media Authority. That's the one that I'm addressing with the disinformation. So the disinformation thing, but that only works within ACMA's powers, which only covers broadcast and only covers certain things. Okay, so the ACMA have power over advertising, TV, free-to-air TV, and broadcast and other, and, you know, and like media, right? And so ACMA's powers are being expanded to include digital, which makes sense. So that's where that is. Okay. It's not individual users. Then you've got the Office of the Information Commissioner, which is about privacy data. They, under the Privacy Act, have been established. And then you've got the Privacy Ombudsman. Then you've got the ACCC, which is consumer law, implementing consumer law. Okay. They've done a digital services platforms inquiry under their thing, where they've done all of this work at the federal level. Then you've got, see what I'm saying? Then you've got the Australian Electoral Commission, who runs elections, but can't determine, because they're supposed to be impartial and they're only running the elections, they can't rule on truth. Okay. They cannot enforce what is and isn't true. So all of these things fall into gaps, but they're very siloed. Okay. It's very important to understand the way that things are set up is that they are siloed, and almost frustratingly so if you are trying to navigate this system. Some of these things, so the social media harms and all that sort of stuff, I imagine it would be the e-safety commissioner that runs this. I imagine it would be, but this legislation it's limited to one department or possible cross department, but that has its own issues, because you've got to have memos between each department in order to even share information, and that needs its own like regulation and law passed and all that sort of stuff. It needs authorization. It is so annoying and boring, but you can't. It's more complicated. Anyway, I've wandered off on a tangent, but remember that these things are existing. They're not existing in a vacuum. They're existing in a context where there's a moral panic over technology, particularly around TikTok. This whole, I don't know if you've seen overnight, but this whole people have been pulling the batteries out of their phones. Because of the Iran situation and the Hezbollah pager situation. So people have obviously been fed some sort of paranoid bullshit that spins that stuff again. However you feel about the tactic, I'm impressed, to be honest. But again, I can separate the actual tactic and the tech from, the impact. I'm like, that's interesting strategy. But it's obviously resulted in now the latest to 24 hours moral panic on the internet, with a bunch of people panicking and pulling out the batteries of their smartphones, which is funny. But, people are prone to moral panic. People have shown time and time again, every day this week, people are showing that they can't, they can't be left to just consume the internet unsupervised without some intervention or some intermediary that is not Elon Musk, that is not Peter Thiel, that is not Mark Zuckerberg, because they have certain economic interests and they are not in your mental health, your safety, and your, democracy, right? People think that, it's not neutral. Okay, Elon Musk represents the extreme of that at the moment, as does Thiel, but they all have the same interests, which is in them being able to do whatever they want, them deciding what products they put out and when, and harvesting us, or them being in control of all of the data. Okay, so if you implement something where it is an anonymous handshake, they don't have any good reason to keep that data. The reason that the cop-out that they use right now is that we need the data to do the things that you're asking of us. It's well, no, you needed better technology. You can't do that. I'm sorry. And the governments are kind of over a barrel. And it's so frustrating. It's so fucking frustrating. Anyway, but this culture war's bullshit. Everything is a fucking culture war or a moral panic. And it's if people are making you afraid of the government, I would trust. It's okay to be skeptical. Ed Snowden, Glenn's work around Ed Snowden, obviously Julian Assange. and various other like whistleblowers and various other cases like that. They are outliers and they are important. It is important to stay vigilant, okay? But there is vigilance and then there is paranoia fueled, like heuristics that make it, those are largely exceptions where we know how they failed. Like the reason that Assange fell in the cracks that he fell was because there was no legal framework in which to deal with WikiLeaks at the time. And so they used the loophole to go after him. And again, I'm not saying that again, that's probably a terrible example, probably a bad example because he represents a kind of outlier in many ways, okay? But at the same time, it's like he's not the norm, okay? The unique set of circumstances that were his case, okay, as egregious as it is, was that he was, are you sharing state secrets? Okay? Are you sharing Hillary Clinton's emails before an election? Are you engaged in, hacking? Whether it's, ethical or unethical hacking is by the by. Are you leaking information? Are you, manipulate? Are you involved in disinformation? Or are you like putting others in danger, right? By releasing information unfiltered without sort of, adhering to journalistic standards or ethics or, various other things. Or are you sharing fucking edgy memes that no one gives a shit about? They don't give a shit. Okay. I'm saying it's just, there's degrees of everything. It's not everything doesn't have to be at 11 all the time. It can be a 1 or a 2 and require a sensible sort of thing. And for the most part, for most of us, regardless of how like shadow banned I am or whatever, okay, I have been algo fucked more than anyone. But it shouldn't be in the hands of companies. It shouldn't be in the hands of fucking Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg using AI that I can't correct. Under these frameworks, I at least have some recourse and can correct it because the mandate of government is to protect your rights. They have to. That is the one thing governments are required to do that corporations aren't. Under human rights law, corporations, human rights are optional. With governments who sign human rights, it is enforceable if it's the state. Under human rights, okay? So, it's slightly more complicated than that, but I'm saying it's more enforceable if it's the state. They're more accountable for a breach of rights than corporations. I don't want corporations deciding what kids can and can't see without any scrutiny or process or them being responsible for the decisions that they make and them not having a paper trail or having to, have a high, to balance of probabilities show that they were reasonable in their efforts. That's reasonable. That's fair. Okay? That's how it should be. And anyone who is saying otherwise and making you think that this is some sort of Orwellian thing, don't trust them. It's fucking... Why do you trust Elon Musk and Thiel and fucking Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos, who's, they're all buying up media to tell you lies that Murdoch, why are you trusting these fucks? They're not independent media. They're paid millions of dollars by these fucking assholes to lie to you. And so you vote against your own interests. A story as old as fucking time. So anyway, but it's not even people are talking about how it's a blanket ban and there's no exceptions. And it's like, call the cops. There's a 6-year-old using an iPhone. And it's like, no, you'll still be able to access the internet. You'll still be able to access appropriate levels of service. And parents can still decide and go, okay, no, I think this kid, this particular kid is okay and I'm going to let them have it. It still comes back to the parents. Parents still have a say in this stuff. I mean, I would urge they don't. I would urge that they keep their parental controls on and sandbox for as long as possible, as long as the kid, as long as it's appropriate for the kid. But you shouldn't cut it off completely anyway because, they don't have protective behaviours associated with, tech that they should develop over time. We all saw what happened to fucking people who weren't active on social media and then they got onto COVID and they fucking discovered that Twitter existed and their brains melted. They had no immunity. mostly because they're anti-vax, but, you know, they also had no immunity from, like, the internet at large. Like, part of the reason why why I managed to stay relatively normal is because I'm used to the internet being stupid and, like, annoying and full of crap. And I know how to filter that stuff better than most people. But, like, and also because I actually go and read the thing that they're talking about before talking about it. But, you know, there's exemptions in place for all sorts of things, and it only applies to big platforms. It only applies, and you know, the level of regulation goes up with the level of risk of the platform. Like I said, things that can spread quickly, things that where there is, you know, direct access to children. Let's have a global platform that is not liable for the ability to directly DM an image platform with teenage girls who are doing selfies. I can't see a problem there. That's what they're arguing for. No laws there, okay? Or they're asking that they should be able to design the products, and they are the kings that decide when and where and how to implement. It's like, no, that's not how this works, cunt. You work with society. The government decides those things. We set the standard. You meet the standard, and pay your fucking taxes, dickhead. That anyway. But I'm saying, and it's also quite targeted, right? So a lot of it's like that, as much as they're going to say that they're going to take away your right to speech, they're not coming after your average adult, okay, who's talking shit on Twitter, okay? The only time that they're probably going to do that is if, you know, they still need to have, there's still an evidentiary standard to all of this stuff and a resource thing. And like cops don't even show up for a burglary. Do you think they're going to show up for a fucking like kid playing Angry Birds without people? It's like, what the fuck? What world do you live in? Where you must be white if you think that the cops come. Or you must be, no, the other way, I'm saying you must be very privileged if you call the police and they show up, okay? That was a better way to word it. But, you know, like there's no, there are checks and balances and safeguards at every step of the process, including the ability to appeal, the ability to get a review, the ability that don't exist with a corporation. Like that's what you want. You want the ability, my kid is on Facebook, I don't think they should have Facebook. And then you can contact Facebook as the parent and say, take it down. That's what the law provides for. Your rights as a parent to decide that they should delete their account. And you can request that, okay? It's like, you know, like that's fairly common sense. That 6-year-old should not have an Instagram. I need to authorize that. And if they sneakily go and do it, I need to be able to go and say, that's a child. I would like that deleted, please. That's what the recommendation is. Wow, such horrors. It's Orwellian. It's Orwellian. Didn't you know it's Orwellian? No, what's Orwellian is Peter Thiel and Palantir owning your data and selling it to the highest bidder with no fucking recourse or safeguards. That is Orwellian, okay? This is society. This is governing, okay? That's the difference. But, you know, obviously over-regulation and, you know, things are not going to work, but it's a staged out. And also it's phased. So every time we have a new law or report, it's only a report, it's not even a legislation, but once there's a legislation on the table, they'll get feedback on that. But that's always open to review. At any time, Parliament can go, we're going to, they did this with the Online Safety Act. The Online Safety Act was supposed to be reviewed next year. They said, I think that's too far away. We're bringing it forward and we're going to we're going to propose any amendments and stuff, right? We're going to do that. And so like they've brought that review forward. That will result in, guess what? A draft discussion, a draft interim paper that will then be open to feedback. That will then be have a final draft. That will then have series of recommendations attached to it. That will then recommend that the legislation be updated for this. That legislation will be drafted and open for comment. Then that will go through the lower house of Parliament for debate. Then it will go for a second reading in the lower house for debate. Then they might pass it. Then guess where it goes? It goes to the upper house for a first reading, for a debate, second reading for a debate. And also, guess what? Legislation has a human rights statement attached to every one of it. So if there's any incompatibility with any human rights, they need to explain why. The threshold for why that right is being breached, you know, it has to be proportional. You have to give a good reason. So if there's any conflict with freedom of expression or fucking the rights of the child, that will be in the human rights statement and they'll address it, and then it will be passed or not passed. And then it can be open to review. It's authoritarian. That's how authoritarian works, fellas. It's very, very boring and requires you to show up an awful lot. Fucking idiots. Anyway, and also, like, oh, it's digital ID. It's not going to, like, there's lots of different solutions, right? So there's obviously the solutions that exist right now are the scary solutions. And that is because it is run by corporations who are for profit and who are selling the data, okay? So someone like Glenn Greenwald, who works for Peter Thiel directly, okay, he was one of the first major creators on Rumble, which means there was an exchange and a deal there, okay? It's not a coincidence that all the people who are on Rumble are sharing this same bullshit, okay? Either they're retarded, like you know, or they are lying by omission on purpose, okay? Which is that, like, the only way to do this is with, like, surveillance and government surveillance, surveillance. And it's not the government that, like, the government is actually in favor of more like encrypted device level authorization. They're not bringing in digital, like this. Oh my God. I'm so sick of COVID brain. Everything coming back to COVID. Everything. And it's like, it's not like fucking, like, this whole narrative is bull. It's just touch grass, read a book, touch grass, touch grass, walk to the library, sit in that library, walk back on the grass, and then maybe come back and talk. Okay. Go for several walks to the library on grass, read some stuff, and then come back, and then we'll talk. However, so, I actually remember with this video of Glenn Greenwald's, I actually yelled out, "Oh, fuck off," because he was linking it all to COVID and linking it all to fucking lockdowns and linking it all. It's like, they're not the same things. They're separate things. They're not related. And digital ID is, like, it sounds scary, but there's lots and lots of different ways to implement it. Now, the best way the problem that we've got is that not that the tech doesn't exist to show your age and verification in a way that is private. It is that most people won't use it. Like, people don't even use, like, you know, like the two-factor authentication on your phone. Like, most people don't use that app. They'll turn it off, and because there's too much friction, right? And the solutions that are private often have a much higher level of like you can have blockchain enabled, like, encrypted pass keys and all that sort of shit that verify your ID and, you know, all of that. But you need a hardware wallet, you need, you know, or, you know, your phone. And then, you know, obviously you've got to make sure that that's secure and encrypted. But if it's secure and encrypted, then, you know, you can't catch these are really big. So you've got to find a sort of an equilibrium between Palantir, who work with the fucking, like, what the fuck? I don't understand how people don't go, hey, that guy owns the fucking data and sells that shit to the CIA. He's not credible. Like, I don't understand how people think that he's the good guy. Oh, that guy that sells that defense contractor who makes billions of dollars from your data might not want a solution that makes them have to destroy that data, because it goes from, you know, all of that massive burn book that they've got on you that they can abuse and sell to the worst people on earth anytime, to, like, governments who are accountable to fucking system processes, courts, all that sort of stuff, because we've got rights under the government. We don't have fucking rights with these guys because they keep skipping town. It's not hard. But I don't know how anyone wouldn't see that there's a conflict of interest there. It's fucking, oh my God, why am I even bothering with this shit? You know, I get halfway through and I go, this is fucking, oh my God. Anyway, but, like, again, it's for, like, but, you know, does age verification violate privacy rights? Well, in most cases, again, I'm not going to do the whole, you know, quibbles over this, because, again, we trade privacy for freedom at all times. I mean, all these people will still sign up for a fucking Woolworths everyday rewards card, and that is more bullshit than anything that the government would do. Again, it's just, well, live consistently. They sign up for a fucking rewards card for a 5% discount on shit and hand over all of their data. And I've worked with Woolworths. I know they harvest that shit. They harvest and they buy all that shit just so they can, if you don't think that they're going to start implementing dynamic pricing and that they're not pushing for there being no prices on the shelves and you getting your own personalized price, I got a bridge to sell you. Okay. Again, if the government tried to do that shit, you'd be able to go to court and go, hey, the government's breaching my rights. Okay. Unfortunately, because corporations have rights too, in most cases, you can only ask them nicely to, obviously you've got the Privacy Act and stuff. I mean, I'm just saying, but they'll find a way to fall in the gaps there and exploit you, okay? And you have no recourse. Which would you prefer? Which one is more Orwellian to you? The one where the bureaucrat who couldn't give a shit about your memes and what you're saying or anything, or like Peter Thiel and fucking Palantir selling burn books on you to Israel because you fucking said something on Twitter that sympathized even marginally with the Palestinians, okay? And you think that's not happening? It's fucking happening, okay? Now, as much as it's funny about the phone batteries being destroyed, because that's funny, that is, again, an exemption, a thing where people have the right fear and the wrong idea, but it's displaced and it's not... They're walking into the fucking lion's den, okay? Because they go, oh, no, this is a thing. And they're using, it's not the government that's doing it. The government's buying the shit for bad purposes. And it's the IDF and stuff are buying that shit from private corporations who are above the law, okay? And they're bypassing all of these democratic checks and balances in order to do that, okay? Or is it the government who's trying to contain that, who don't give a shit? Okay, unless they're at war, and obviously that's a different thing. But you still, again, the way that that's why government exists. There's a process, an appeal. They're held to a better standard and higher standard, which errs on the side of your rights. Okay, corporations, you have none. That's why when you work in a corporate job, you fucking, it's basically living in fascist dictatorship. Okay, run by the SS. Fuck you, Sheila. You can't go away. All right. That shit. You don't have any rights. The government has to fucking pull rights away and give you rights away from the corporations because they just steal that shit. Anyway, I made no sense. I'm incoherent. So, where's my coffee? Probably cold by now. Talked too long. How long has I been going? Oh, fuck. Okay. But this slippery slope argument is so stupid, and also consider the source. I just don't understand how it's not obvious that someone's paid by Rumble to bullshit. That's what, yeah, anyway, drives me nuts. But, regulations, they're everything. If you read the report, all the recommendations are perfectly reasonable. And anyone telling you otherwise is full of crap. Okay? And still, there's review periods, consultation periods. If you don't like it, write to your MP. Read the shit first. Don't just write and rant about go off half-cocked, but actually read the shit. If you've got any actual objections to anything and or you have an idea for a way that it could work, they'll listen. They have to. They're required to listen. Okay? That's what government is. Okay? Especially here. Okay. But it also gives flexibility and reasonableness. Okay? Reasonableness has a legal standard attached to it across. It's a doctrine of law. The word reasonable is not just something that you make up and it's, what is reasonable? What is what? What is reasonable? It's established through common law. Read it. Look it up. Look anything up. Just one thing, a word. Start with if you need to. What does mean? And then work from there. Okay. But, you'll see that the cherry picking that happens here, which is to sell you a narrative, which is that it's perfectly reasonable, rational fucking rules. Anyway, so basically all it does is that it okay, I've gone on too long and I've got to go soon. But it establishes a statutory duty of care, which didn't exist before. So if your kid gets hurt or harmed by social media, they can't get your case instantly dismissed under their other protections, and they can't do certain things. They are on the hook. You get your day in court at least, okay? Or at least the opportunity to, get a settlement or something like that. They need to, in a court of law, establish that they don't have a duty of care, okay? Versus you having to establish that they do. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, duty of care means they're responsible. There's the reasonable steps defence, so they can avoid penalties by showing that they've taken reasonable steps to comply, and also there's exemptions for low risk services. So forums, education. They're not shutting down your website comment section. Okay, it'll be. I imagine it'll just be, here's our report every year, like they do for everything else. And then obviously the most egregious examples, such as fuckwit, Captain Fuckstick, and his merry band of brain rotten fucking idiots, or at X, they get at least a letter in the mail. How dare someone write him a letter of concern about his actions, given that he's just incited violence against the sitting president of the United States and the current candidate for his successor. I mean, geez, it's almost like he can't say what the fuck he wants and do what the fuck he wants whenever he wants to. I'm 5 next year. I'm grown up. I'm a big boy. It's like, no, grow up. Fuckwit. Most of the laws, again, that's the fuckwit rule. 95% of the laws are there for 10% of the fuckwits. And you know why? Because Elon Musk is a powerful fuckwit and they're having to make all these laws just for him. Not just for him, but him and people like him who can't fucking use the internet with some restraint and self-awareness, for fuck's sake. Sexually harassing, inciting fucking sexual violence against Taylor Swift, and not just Taylor Swift, but again, fuck about Taylor Swift, but the people who defend Taylor Swift. You don't think that sends an angry mob towards anyone who mentions Taylor Swift or defends her in any way at the lower levels as well? It's not just, Elon Musk is making a joke. Again, I can appreciate the joke. Shit joke, whatever. But it's not that. It's about the fact that he takes no responsibility for his actions or his responsibility. That he's got an army of fuckwits who are talking about dehumanizing women, how women are breeders, how they're useless and fucking incel bullshit, and sicking them against all of the fucking women on his platform all the time. That's going to end badly. And when it does end badly, they should be allowed to sue him. That is a minimum. Okay? He needs to be a citizen in this, in this world and be accountable for his negligence. He's not above the law, and that's all this is, okay? It's not about censorship like the Brazil thing. Fuck off with that bullshit. It was because he refused to have a legal representative in the country and he wouldn't meet the bare minimum, despite all his, as long as it's the law. No, as long as it's the law that he agrees with. Okay, and it's it's the same thing with the e-safety commissioner here, and I'm just so fucking sick of these people who should know better, journalists who should be abiding by a code of ethics, and people who I know are trained lawyers and who should know better and do know better, unless they've caught brainworms, which is highly likely because, current year, get some therapy. Fuck's sake. But this is all sensible stuff. They're all just recommendations. But it's not like this idea that we just make up laws. So, Prime Minister just sits on the toilet. I suppose that's how Trump supporters see it, because that's what Trump does, which is, first of all, we don't have the ability to, presidents we don't have really executive orders here. Okay, so it's all done by Parliament. Governor General technically is the head of state, but for the most part, you don't get executive orders here. Okay, they've got to go through a process. We're not fuckwits. Okay, but they tell on themselves a bit about how they would be if they were in power, which is to just sit on the toilet, think of a thing, and sign an executive order and let everyone else just fall around it. That's not how it works. These are years of consultation, sometimes months, sometimes years of consultation. It's an ongoing process. Every expert is consulted. Any member of the public who takes an interest and wants to submit, You know, you are invited to participate at every turn, and it is open to review. They make sure to put reasonableness and exceptions and have a process of review and have judicial review and all that stuff. They have a human rights statement. They have all of that stuff. They have all of the passage of the bill. And then that bill, once it's an act, gets interpreted in the courts and clarified by the courts, and it all fucking starts again until, you know, it's like, I don't know what you want. I don't know how you think that things work. Pisses me off. Oh no, they're bringing in the digital ID. You know, fucking, I don't want the government to see my. It's like, oh, for fuck's sake, grow up. And that's not even right. That's not just right wingers. This is fucking lefties too. No one cares. And if you are being a fuckwit, stop being a fuckwit, because most people aren't of interest. I know that this may come as a surprise to you all. But even when I've been shadow banned and all that stuff, I've never thought that it was about because I'm interesting. It's because I fell through the cracks and I did certain things that I realized I was like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense for a perfectly reasonable thing. Like, you know, the C word. I understand why it's banned, because fascists use it to harass Taylor Swift fans. Okay, and it's like, I understand why. I don't like it, and I wish that there were more opportunities for human review, but that's because there needs to be a process of appeal, and you have some rights, and they have a duty of care, and they're not allowed to ban you. It's not censorship. You can't have it both ways. You can't complain about being shadow banned with no recourse and all that stuff, and then fucking oppose any attempts to legislate in a way that gives you that fucking right. Fuck me. What do you want? Far out. Oh my God. Why are you paid so much money and I make no dollar? Boo. That's all right. No. Become a patron. I have a few patrons, but like nowhere near the amount of money. Fucking Tim Pool. Oh my God. I'm still not over it. I'm still not over it, and I will never get over it. The amount of money these people are paid to bullshit. I can't believe it. And it's not even like, it just makes, I go between amused and mad, but I'm mostly mad because the fact is, like, this is what people like me are up against. Nonsense, stupid, paid, like fuck tons of money that I could not even imagine earning to like do my life's work. And I do it for free. And I read all of the stuff. I do all of the very boring things. And I read all of the boring things. And yes, I might not be the most concise, interesting presenter, and I'm not really great at sound bites. But it's almost like some of these things aren't soundbite things. See? Very good. Very eloquent. You're brilliant, Taya. Excellent. Anyway, I'm going to... But but there's also lots of different ways that that they can be implemented. So they're doing trials of certain tech, the details of which are still, moving, and they're working really hard to try and find an equilibrium between all of these competing interests. That's what the government does. It's what it's for. Pluralism. If you're a classical liberal that wants liberal values, you believe in pluralism, which is where competing interests are synergized into a workable fucking democratic system. It's not astroturfing the fuck out of things to get what you want your way at all times. That's not democracy. You hear me? I'm tired. I'm getting tired now. I've got a doctor's appointment, so I've got to go. But they're figuring stuff out. There's technical solutions that have, there's the Orwellian shit, which is like biometrics and face ID and stuff. But again, Apple are implementing certain things with facial recognition. You hand over Touch ID without any question and all that sort of stuff. Some people don't, and there's always going to be the more paranoid people, but the more paranoid people will have, as long as you give them the alternative of having the, the hardware wallet with blockchain, all that shit, as long as there is a means of accommodating those preferences and the technology, then there's no problem, okay? As long as there's multiple avenues for you to verify and there is a process to get human review, and then you have checks and balances and the opportunity to take it to court and all that stuff, there's no problem, okay? And kids, again, yes, the evidence is mixed, but I've raised 3.5 kids, okay, 3 in a step, okay, I got one halfway through, and I'm particularly cyber literate. I raised my kids to be pretty Like they're pretty advanced in terms of their media literacy and cyber literacy skills, because it's something that I've, you know, proactively done. Not parents, you know, like, and even I'm sitting there going, you know, this is a problem in certain kids. Like one, you know, like some of the kids had a problem, some didn't, some come out, some didn't, some whatever. Okay. And you need to be able to protect those kids that are more vulnerable to like radicalization or are already like vulnerable, especially because I've got kids on the spectrum. So they're probably a little more vulnerable to bad actors, because, you know, there is a gullibility that goes with being on the spectrum that, you know, the neurotypical kids don't have. There's all these things. Okay. And also obviously, you know, the joke was, you know, banning the over 60s as well. And it's not like about banning the over 60s, but it is, I mean, having things in place that protect the vulnerable from, you know, scams and phishing and that sort of stuff. I mean, that's really important, right? And so verifying ID is actually, you know, verifying that this is coming from, it's not just about making sure you've got ID, but also a way of handshaking. That it's your, yeah, it says my camera. Are we back? Yeah. No, I've got to go because it's saying that the internal temperature is too high, which is not good. Ooh, shit. It's unusual for the camera. Anyway, but like seriously, I'm done anyway. I was just meandering. But yeah, I'll be back. I'll try to turn this into something. I may disappear again. We'll see how we go. But I'll be back soon. Take care. And yeah, sorry for the abrupt ending, but it's you know, I've outstayed my welcome anyway. So, all right, I'll try and edit this into something, but all right, I won't. I like to think I will, but I won't. Anyway, but do keep an eye out for the written piece where I debunk some of this stuff as well, because I think it's very important. But fucking hell, critical thinking, people. Like, oh my God, baseline. Think about the interests involved. Like, seriously. Oh my God, this anti-government shit. If someone links this stuff to COVID, they're not to be trusted. It's not, they're separate, they're different issues. Okay? And government departments generally don't talk to each other. If anything, it's the opposite, and it's very frustrating that they don't. Okay? So then those limitations make things take a long time. I've worked on these things and done government projects, and it's very, very, very annoying. And they're not sitting around fucking talking about you. Trust me. Okay? Anyway, I love you. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your precious life seconds. I've got to piss. And also now my camera's fucked. Well, it's not fucked. It's just hot. I don't know why. I have to look that up. Okay. Take care. Bye. What a load of old shit.